Conservative New Media viewers, what's going on? It's me, John D. Villarreal, the four-time national champion, the super genius, and the political expert, joined by Paul at Villarreal. And my wife Salma may jump in the shot. We never know what she's going to do. So, in the last video, we talked about congratulations for Donald Trump. This is the night of the GOP primary. He won big in that, and it looks like he's got a lot of momentum. Now, there's been a lot of discussion. I've been meaning to do this video for a while now about my suggestions for proposed rule changes or for the GOP nomination procedures, if you will, convention, all that type of stuff. Now, Paul, there's been a lot of criticism about voterless victories, quote unquote, and how we have caucuses in some states and primaries in some states, and the Never Trump movement, and say it's about the delegates, and this is the rules of the rules, and we're hearing all these different things, blah 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 blah. I have a couple extremely simple proposals that I think will clear up most, perhaps even all of this. I mean, there's no perfect system, everything like that, but I'm going to boil this down to this. First, I'm going to lay out my assumptions quickly, and then I'm going to get right to this, and I want you, the viewer, to tell me what you think about this. Number one, I agree with, I have an undergrad degree in political science. I got a law degree from Berkeley. I've done a lot of political work most of my life, including being involved in U.S. Senate campaigns. Now, so, I definitely believe, and I've correctly predicted so many things, including the major arcs of this election, frankly, in my opinion, all along the way, and you can look at my videos on that. So my sort of political expertise, in my opinion, has been well established, as well as the educational foundation expertise. Let's talk about this. Josh Marshall said something about this. I was thinking about this. I love Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America. It's not about rules, it's about legitimacy. Elections are about legitimacy, not so much about rules. Not to say that rules aren't important, but the point of it is this. This is not, 1860s with Abraham Lincoln. This isn't 1776. This isn't even 1960. This is 2016. And whether we're seeing, people not that long ago voting in Iraq or voting in different places all around the world, and democracy, people fighting for democracy, stuff like that. Now, you can talk about a representative republic, and that's fine. Talking about a representative republic has nothing to do with, in my opinion, or very little to do with the rules of the Republican Party and how they do different things, particularly when those rules are subject to change before the convention, and the rules are supposed to be the rules until they change the rules with Colorado, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all those things are distractions. I think the bottom line is this. You cannot have a system where you ask voters to vote for your candidate in the general election, you ask voters to volunteer, you ask general average American voters to donate to campaigns and causes and parties and all this type of stuff, and then you basically, in one way or the other, to varying degrees, tell those voters to pound sand. Now, representative republic basically means that, yes, we don't have direct democracy, and again, we can get way into the weeds and all that type of stuff. And I don't want to hear about majorities, and it's a majority rules, and that's American. We saw ranks previously. Again, distraction, and that's also not quite correct. Because I remember, Paul, not that long ago, we had Bill Clinton winning the presidency by a plurality because we had Ross Perot in there. He didn't win, Bill Clinton didn't win a majority. No one said that wasn't legitimate. And sometimes you have Ralph Nader running, we have different parties, and we have parties around, we have, my wife's from Israel. In Israel, you have all kinds of parties running, and then sometimes they have to get together and form coalition governments and do different things and stuff like that. So I don't think that there's any kind of a hard rule about a majority has to rule or anything like that. And again, if you're talking about majority rules, then you're basically saying that we should go by what the people want. Then why are you doing what you're doing in Colorado and Wyoming, etc. like that? So I think there's tremendous inconsistencies and hypocrisies and smoke screens from the insiders, in my opinion. So therefore, I will propose this, and I want to get your reaction to it, and Salma can say something if she wants as well. And I want to get your viewers' reaction. You got to clear it all up. If you got to make this thing simple. What I would do is Forget about conventions and picking. If you want to eliminate most of the issues, step one, you want to be legitimate, make it that the voters decide. So how do you do that? Well, you make sure that every state has a primary. Why a primary? What about a caucus? We've always had a caucus. That's great. Guess what? Anytime you can have an entire state's delegate or entire state's sort of proportional impact on a campaign or the nomination being affected by 800, 3,000, 30,000 people, as opposed to 5, 10, 20 times that would come out to vote for a primary, I don't think that's good. Maybe some people are too busy to vote. Maybe they're a doctor, maybe they're a lawyer, maybe they're a single mom, maybe they're a bus driver or a prison guard or who knows what, and they don't have time to spend 3, 4, 5 hours in a caucus, but they could spend 10 minutes to go vote in a primary. Primary is, voting in a primary is very similar to voting in a general election, which is what people do, stuff like that. Make everything a primary. Make them all the same. Standardize it so that this state is just like that state and everything like that. So that's number one. I think you make everything a primary. Step one. Step two, I'm not opposed to a delegate system, and I'll tell you why when I get to it. I'm not saying it has to be that. I think there's plenty of other ways we can do that. But let's just say for the sake of being that we keep the delegate system for now. Fine. The delegates should be assigned, and you can. I'm open. I haven't thought tremendously about it, but I'm open to arguments about if some states want to do winner take all, or some states want to do proportional, or whatever. I think there's arguments. Either way, again, there's no perfect system, but I'm relatively open to hearing about that. But I think you make everything a primary. I think that you, assign. Now, when you assign the delegates, I don't think the delegates should be assigned by conventions or state party bosses or county bosses or anything like that. I think the delegates need to be assigned by the candidates who won them. Because they're supposed to be Trump delegates or Cruz delegates or Kasich delegates or whatever like that. Let the candidates and their campaigns decide who they want their delegates to be. That's how I think you should do it, number two. So number one, everything should be a primary. Number two, the candidates or campaigns who won those delegates should be able to decide those delegates, not the party. So now you have something, in my opinion, that immediately has dramatically more legitimacy than the previous system. Number three, those delegates should be bound to those candidates on every single ballot if those candidates are still in the race. Therefore, meaning right now, for the purpose of this discussion, at the time of shooting this video, Trump, Kasich, Cruz. So, if you have a situation where every state has voted and they all come down to the end there, and no one has a majority of the delegates or something. Well, that would be number four too, Paul. Number four is, I don't think it should be a majority. I think whoever wins the most wins the most. I think that's it. You can win. If you can win the presidency with a plurality, you should be able to win the primary with a plurality. Bottom line. But if for some reason that people aren't okay with that, and we should keep it a majority, this and that, whatever. Then I think in that case, option 5 or 4A or B, if you will, would be all the delegates are absolutely bound on every single ballot to the candidates that won them if that candidate is still in the race. For those candidates that dropped out or suspended or whatever, Jeb Bush, Rubio, the rest of them, then those are the delegates that you need to persuade if you're short. So that Trump, whatever he goes in with, if he goes in with 1,100 or 1,200 and whatever, then he needs to persuade those candidates, those delegates of the candidates who suspended or dropped out to try to get over the line. If Cruz, if Rove or the rest of them are right that everyone who didn't vote for Trump are against Trump, great. Prove it by having Cruz win the delegates of everyone else that's out. Because if Cruz can win the delegates of everyone else that's out, then maybe he has some legitimacy. Otherwise, all this stealth Trojan horse delegates to vote for Trump on the first ballot and Cruz on the second ballot. That's just garbage. That's not going to work. Not today's day. Those are my proposals, Paul. What do you think of that?
I think it's basically really good. I completely agree. Every state should be a primary. No question about it. We're 2016. That should definitely be done. No more caucuses, and certainly no election states like Colorado was this time around. But everything should be a primary. No doubt about it. 100%. But the delegates being assigned by the candidates, good. Yeah, that's fine. That's great. Definitely they should not be assigned by the party bosses, particularly when, like in Colorado, seemed to be, it's like, oh, well, we did it, and they're going to be against Trump on the second ballot. That shouldn't be happening. That just doesn't make any sense, and it has nothing to do with voting. Number 3, the plurality versus majority. I completely agree. Pluralities are totally valid. Not only are they valid in presidential elections, as you mentioned, I think it should be valid in terms of delegates won. If you start out a thing and you have a certain number like 1237, but you have 20 candidates, it's going to be hard to get to it.
Paul, sorry, super quick, I want to put this in there. It's valid in the primary process itself. We have plenty of these. Ted Cruz won Texas with a plurality. He didn't win a majority in Texas, if I remember correctly. Maybe I remember incorrectly or something. But whether he did or whether he didn't, there's been many of these contests, particularly early on, when you said there were, over a dozen candidates in where the primary was won with the plurality. So if you can win with the plurality in the process, in one part of the process, why can't you win the plurality with the whole process?
I completely agree. What you said about these fake arguments about representative government and majority versus plurality, right? We would have representative government, that's true, but we elect the people to represent us. You don't need another level of hands-offness. In other words, you elect the person that you want to represent you, not, well, you elected delegates, but the delegates aren't going to go for the person. That just makes no sense. As you said, this is all about legitimacy. This is all about transparency. It doesn't matter what happened in 1860. It doesn't matter what happened in 1970. At this point in time, you cannot do this and have the good of the party preserved, I don't think, and it won't hold up. As you said, I mean, you will have people leaving the party and very upset. So I agree with you. I think the proposals are good. Okay.
And then do you want to comment on the last proposal? Well, I guess which is number 3, doesn't matter, which is basically that if a candidate is still in the race, that those delegates that candidate won have to vote for that candidate on every single ballot. Therefore, if there is a contested convention, if you're going to keep that majority 1237 rule, that the only delegates, if you will, that can be persuaded or can be won over are those delegates won by candidates that either suspended and or dropped out of the race.
And I have to think about that more, but that seems like something that could be fair.
Well,
I mean, in other words,
and here's the thought, real quick. Here's the thought process behind that. You eliminate the Trojan delegate issue because the delegates would be selected by the candidates or campaigns under my proposal, and even then, if somehow, some way that you selected the wrong candidate that was really a Cruz supporter, if it was a Trump delegate or vice versa or whatever, that it doesn't matter that delegate has to vote for that person who's still in a race to be more representative of the will of the people, and therefore the only delegates that can be persuaded are those delegates that are pledged to candidates that are no longer in the race and have suspended their campaign.
Yeah, certainly the delegates that are pledged to people still in the race, they absolutely should have to vote for the candidate. Yes, I'm 100% with that. The thing about can you persuade the delegates who were to represent some candidate out of the race, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe there's a way you could break it down to that. Like, in other words, you might be able to take some of the wiggle room out of that, but in terms of voting for somebody still in the race, yeah, absolutely. We don't need any more of this fudging around. Yeah, I'm definitely for that.
Well, so here's how it plays out. if we agree to all these rules, I think you have the most legitimate, result that you can have. Either you're good. So basically, let's review those again quickly. Number one, every state is a primary. There's no caucuses, there's no convention, there's no strange rules, there's no all these other things and confusion, this and that, whatever. It's straight up, just like a general election. Everyone knows how to, and if you voted before, has some familiarity in a general election or most elections, you should have familiarity with that. So that, I think, makes it much more legitimate, in my opinion, and where the people are directly involved. Number two, if you're going to keep a delegate system, those delegates then that are won, whether it's winner take all, and again, we're open to that. We can have a discussion whether they should be winner take all or proportional, either all of one, a mix of one, states decides, whatever, or a mix of some, states decide, whatever. We can have, I'm open to those discussions, and there's pros and cons both ways. Fine. But however you do it, if a candidate wins the delegates, that candidate and or campaign get to pick their own delegates, not the party, not the whether state party, national party, county party, local party, whatever like that. There's not in a separate convention. Forget it. It is the candidates that get to pick. They want them. They get to pick their own delegates. Number three, the delegates that are pledged to candidates that are still in the race, if there's a contested convention by the time they get to the convention, any candidates that stay in the race must vote for the delegates that they won, must vote for that candidate on every single ballot, whether there's one ballot or 100 ballots at the national convention to pick a nominee. Now, the subset of that is, again, and the other part of that is do we want to have a majority rules or plurality rules? Again, I think the plurality should rule. In other words, whoever ends up with the most votes, the most delegates, the most state ones, whatever like that, should be the winner right then and there. We shouldn't have a contested convention. But if some people want to go with the majority rules, fine. Therefore, the only delegates that are then persuadable, if you will, at a contested convention are those delegates that are pledged to candidates that have either suspended and or dropped out of the race. I think if you make those rule changes and you do it that way, it would be much more legitimate and people would be not as unhappy as they are now. And I think that most people would agree that or some tweak or some kind of version of that would be a lot more fair, Paul. I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah, I agree. That would be much more fair than what we're dealing with now. And like you said, maybe a little tweak here or there, but basically those are the essential principles. I agree with that.
Salma, what do you think of that? She's going to say something right now.
Okay. I apologize for all American people, but I'm not politically correct, and I never was.
Now she's making me nervous.
I will never be.
Okay.
It caught my attention, the fact that the media, there are big insiders, especially Fox News, or even talk show radio.
Here we go.
Radio with Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, and etc. 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 They are so.
Are you trying to get me in trouble with everybody?
No, but listen, people are not blind. It's just I'm a foreign. I was foreign, and I was foreigner. Okay, what I mean is I was born in Israel, so it immediately caught my attention. Even not being here in the USA for long years, I can't believe how the media and the media, whether it's TV shows, whether it's radio talk show, can really they always try to deviate the truth from people. They are so pro-Cruz and against Trump in so many ways that
You're saying that their insiders are spinning it, they've got their own agenda and all. Okay, fine. But for the
they're
purposes
all insiders.
Okay, for the purposes of this video.
Yeah.
What do you think of my proposals to change the way the nominee is selected?
I totally agree, because I believe that people has to choose the candidate it's not the media. It's not like the rules or the Republican
The
Party.
insiders. Yeah, the rules are the rules until we change the rules.
Exactly.
Right before the election.
Not just that, the insiders will fight so hard to keep their position and their power. People have to vote, not for the Republican Party. This is what I believe, and I will continue to believe that. And God bless America.
Okay, so there you have it. That's my opinion, Salma's opinion, Paul's opinion. So for Paul and Salma, I am John, the super genius, political expert, and the 4-time national champion. What do you think of my proposals? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Give me the comments below. Please subscribe. Please rate this video up. Also, please post it on your social networking sites. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.